Alright, hello everyone, and thank you for tuning in once again to the Black Box Podcast, BBOR, Black Box Online Radio, coming to you from West Virginia. Today we are revisiting the case of Amanda Knox, or more specifically, the murder of Meredith Kercher, way back in Perguia, Italy. And this was something that I got into because we recently covered the Madeleine McCann case on this channel, and so much of that, we've talked about like the parents in the Madeleine McCann case. Are they revealing some telltale signs of lying during their interviews and some suspicious behavior around them? In the case of Amanda Knox, there is an enormous amount of people online who believe that Amanda Knox is guilty, and one of the things that they point to is just her body language, a handful of things really, her body language, demeanor, her attitude, her responses. But I was listening to an interview with Sky News, and I did a whole upload on Madeleine McCann talking about the Sky News coverage of that one. It just happened to be a coincidence that I found these two things. Maybe something to do with the YouTube algorithm or something like that. But I found this interview on Sky News with the family of Meredith Kercher, and this is titled The Murder of Meredith Kercher because her brother and sister, Meredith Kercher's brother and sister, that is, were just like, this case turned into everything being about Amanda Knox and not about the victim, Meredith Kercher. I mean, and you really have to kind of recognize that. Now, this is not going to be so much of a hard evidence upload because we've covered this case on this channel a handful of times, and I'll hopefully post some links to this in the description box below. Now, to the links to the previous things that we've covered. Now, I'm going to tell you flat out, I still believe that Amanda Knox is innocent. Some people on the internet might call me a Knox hugger. They might say some things of that nature. But I still stand by what I said during my first Amanda Knox upload when I was like, this is a case where the journalists in Italy and the police could not overcome their own perversions, and they turned this scenario into kind of like a sensational, wild, sex-based media story. And that's the narrative that a lot of people took away from it. And it also goes to show you that there is disinfo on the internet. And there's people who are still complaining that Amanda Knox should not have done a cartwheel when she was being interrogated by the police. And that never happened. That is an internet falsehood. I don't know where that started, that she was doing cartwheels for the police or she did a cartwheel. It says very clearly in her memoir, Waiting to be Heard, she did a split. She's also addressed this in interviews before, and she's like, no, that didn't happen. The police asked if she could perform some yoga moves. Once again, we're talking about not being able to overcome their own perversions. They asked to see her yoga moves, so she did a split for them. And she writes about this in Waiting to be Heard. It felt good that she could still achieve that level of flexibility. She hadn't done it in a while. I don't think that that's too big of an issue. I think people are making a mountain out of a molehill, more or less. But when you want to look at Meredith Kercher, I mean, her family is somebody who is still dealing with the aftermath of this, and it's never going away. Amanda Knox has been freed. There's been talk that she's going to be going back to Italy and doing stuff like appearing on a crime-based television show. And of course there's the Amanda Knox documentary on Netflix. I saw that one, but I was not very impressed with new additional inside information or new perspectives. I was not very impressed. Okay, that stuff is all going on while Amanda Knox is free, but the Kercher family, they lost their daughter, they lost their sister. That's never changing. And it is true, though. I completely agree that the family is... I mean, I can understand why they're upset. All the attention became about Amanda Knox. Granted, though, there was some responsibility from the Italian legal system to determine whether or not Amanda Knox was guilty. And, I mean, we've done a handful of uploads on the physical evidence, and I don't really see the physical evidence there to support Amanda Knox's guilt. You can also see perhaps some fabrications by the Italian authorities, like claiming they found blood on a knife that belonged to Meredith. They found Meredith Kercher's blood on a knife in Raffaella's apartment, and I don't believe that that was a genuine find. I believe they falsified that. Not to mention, it seems like there was one perpetrator in this, Rudy Guede, Guede, the guy from the Ivory Coast, Guede, however you pronounce that. If you don't think he's guilty, why did he flee the country and try to go to Germany? It's like, because he murdered her. And I just don't see the connection between Amanda Knox and committing the murder of Meredith Kercher. Did she commit wrongdoings? Yes, absolutely. She implicated Patrice Lumumba in this, or Patrick Lumumba, excuse me, and she implicated Patrick Lumumba in this and caused an entire firestorm of troubles for him. That was a wrongdoing on her part. But when you actually want to look at some of the things associated with the type of aftermath of this trial, I was on this one blog, and I'll post a link to this one, and I believe it's called Statement Advisory, because it's like, this one was talking about words. It's almost like a language expert. I mean, I'm not sure how professional this person is, but they did this all types of language analysis, and that was one of the reasons why I revisited the Amanda Knox case last winter, because we want to know about the signs of telling the truth. It's like, I have heard this famously, that when people talk with the full words as opposed to the contractions, it is more likely to show that they are guilty. Whether it's like, I did not do that, no contraction, versus I didn't do that. Didn't versus did not. Like if you're saying did not, that means you're more likely to signify guilt. Other things that we talked about when recognizing the signs of guilt of someone, are they moving their hands or feet or not? These are called the anchor points. It's like the human primitive response of trying to cling to something, and it's just that people often they're aware of it with their hands and their arms. People know that they're going to be watching somebody fidget around, so what they try to do is lock their upper body, but then they don't control their feet and they start fidgeting. So that's another thing. But I gotta tell you, I am horribly skeptical of this stuff, because I do not believe it is 100% accurate. And a lot of people who are trying to analyze Amanda Knox's word patterns and her body language and her movements, and she smirked at something and she smiled at something, I would just ask you, whoever you are, has anyone ever accused you of something and you didn't do it? They accused you of lying when you were telling the truth? I can name countless examples or something, especially with something like smiling or laughing. Oh, he's smiling, oh, he's lying, but you're actually telling the truth. Or maybe you hesitate a little before you answer, well, no, I did not. I mean, when you have something like that, I mean, that's happened to me a handful of times. Has it happened to you? It's like, I think that these types of language experts and body language experts may come from a genuine place. There might be something to their analysis that is actually genuine and valuable, but I don't think that for a second that it is 100% scientific, beyond the shadow of a doubt, certifiable, where it's like you can generate even 95% accuracy. Oh, someone's shaking their foot while you're talking to them, that means that they're lying. I think that the human body is affected by way too many variables for that to happen. But I mean, when it comes to Amanda Knox, I've said very clearly, I thought that she was innocent because of the physical evidence, as opposed to anything associated with her body language or her speech patterns. I mean, I'll post a link to this blog because it's kind of an interesting read when they sort of say stuff like, she says like stuff, she talks about getting off for the crime, but she doesn't actually deny that she got off scot-free. I mean, you got to read it for yourselves, and I'll post a link. It's an interesting read. But when we want to talk about the Kercher family, this is something that you got to look at this. Why does the Kercher family get overshadowed by Amanda Knox? Because of the old saying, sex sells or something like that. Because they had this attractive woman who was implicated in a sort of sexually related murder. Amanda Knox is the ringleader of this sex group with Raffaello and Rudy, and those three people murdered Meredith Kercher, and they also were able to vilify Amanda Knox. And I think, was that Watch Mojo or something? They put her in the list of suspects that were vilified in the court of public opinion or something, and it was like they were saying that an enormous amount of people in the public think that she's guilty, and a lot of it is because she was turned into a villain by the media, and they created this very sexual and sensational story. So people stopped talking about Meredith Kercher, and they wanted to talk about, well, they want to know details about Amanda Knox's sex life, to be honest. And the police involved with this were also doing that to Meredith Kercher. Once again, we've talked about this a little bit on the podcast before, but it's like they were saying, like they picked up her tube of Vaseline and they asked Amanda Knox, did Meredith enjoy anal sex and stuff like that? That's from Amanda Knox's memoir, and it's like, I mean, they could not overcome their perversions in this, and that led to a skewering of the case. It led to distortion and misrepresentation, and that's why a lot of people are even trying to figure out, why did Amanda Knox raise her eyebrows? Why did she say that she did not do that? I would just kind of remark on another interesting thing, though, about the language experts' comments. What would you think about this when someone says, I'm not guilty, is different than when people who could be possibly guilty saying, I hope that they don't think this was my fault and this will show on my guilt. I mean, like, people think if you use the phrase my guilt that you are more likely culpable in some way. I mean, I don't know what that means, because one of the examples that they cite about someone who refers to things like, this is not something that's reflective of my guilt or something like that, one of the examples that they cite of that is Patsy Ramsey in the JonBenet Ramsey case. And they also really get into things with her, but that's a different story. I actually believe that Patsy Ramsey could very well be innocent as well in the JonBenet Ramsey case. I mean, no matter what you say about that, Patsy Ramsey is long deceased. That's another story for another time. I mean, it's something that we can examine more. When it comes to language experts and body language experts and the people who are all into this kinesthesiology or whatever it's called, looking at how people move and think and talk and act, that stuff, I don't believe it's accurate, but it wouldn't hurt to investigate a little bit more. I wouldn't be making the blanket statements that somebody is guilty because of their body language, but the reason why people are asking those questions is not only because the police couldn't overcome their perversions, it was also the media, the Italian media, that really took this little ember and turned it into a roaring fire. That they are also equally culpable. Some of it was the police and the investigators, and some of it was also the Italian media. And we also mentioned that perhaps the laboratories that were involved with this case falsified some of their evidence. 3 state-of-the-art laboratories in America using top-notch equipment could not extract DNA from a sample as small as they had, claiming that it was Meredith Kercher's blood on the knife in Raffaella's apartment. So what their conclusion in that was just that the Italian laboratory falsified their results. Either that, or they made a horrendous blunder unbeknownst to them. So that's when I just really still have the, I still support that Amanda Knox is innocent. Some people call me a Knox hugger for that on the internet. But it's like, I just don't see the evidence that's overwhelming of her guilt. So many of the things that relate to Amanda Knox being guilty in the murder of Meredith Kercher is that they don't like her personality. And, I mean, I was reading her memoir. There were times when I didn't like her personality. And that's not coming from the Italian media. That's not coming from any sort of thing that was blowing things out of proportion. That's from her own memoir. And I was just like, I really don't like you. But that does not make her a murderer. That does not make her a murderer. And it's most likely that she was at home with her boyfriend, woke up in the middle of the night, got on the computer for a little bit, went back to sleep, and then woke up, and then that is how the murder of Meredith Kercher came to light. I don't believe that she was implicated in the murder of this. But that's just me. I mean, what do you think about the case? I mean, if you have anything to say at all, please drop a comment below. Do you believe that there is any chance that Meredith Kercher could have been murdered by Amanda Knox? Do you believe that there is any suspect that was not put to trial? Do you believe that there is anything about this case that has been neglected by the authorities and the media? If you have anything to say at all about the murder of Meredith Kercher, please drop a comment below.